Hi, my name is Naomi Kwan, and this is my presentation on Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau was born 1817 in Concord, Massachusetts, to his parents John Thoreau and Cynthia Dunbar. His father was a shoekeeper and eventually moved his family to different cities in Massachusetts like Chelmsford and Boston to pursue business. His family struggled to make ends meet. However, when Thoreau decided to go to Harvard University for college, his older siblings, Helen and John Jr., helped pay for his tuition through their teaching salaries. Thoreau went to Harvard University to study math, literature, science, and arts. Although he was never really fond of the teaching methods used at Harvard, he continued to study there and get a degree. After he graduated in 1837, he returned to Concord. He opened a school with his brother John, but after 4 years they had to close it. As a result, Thoreau pursued his love for writing while also becoming a handyman. He also moved into Ralph Waldo Emerson's house while he tutored children. Throughout his life, Henry David Thoreau was known for many things, such as his writing, his philosophical stances, his fighting in slavery, and his perceptions on nature. One of the most famous movements he's known for is Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is a philosophy that was sprung up in the 19th century as a response to nationalism. Romanticism, Platonism, and Kantian philosophy heavily influenced it. Transcendentalism teaches that divinity is in every aspect of nature and humanity. It also supported other movements like feminism, communal living, and anti-slavery. Other notable figures in this movement were Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, and Theodore Parker. In addition to spending much of his time writing alone in nature, transcendentalism and its themes can be found in Thoreau's writing. This picture here is a quote from probably his most famous piece, Walden. Thoreau published Walden in 1854 as a reflection of his 2 years he spent at Walden Pond. He used this time to heavily reflect on himself and gain insights on nature. He went on July 4, 1845, as a statement of his own independence from society. While he lived at Walden Pond, he developed a life of simplicity and self-sufficiency. Walden primarily focuses on nature, solitude, and contemplation. In its opening, Economy, Thoreau talks about the simplicity of living and what are really necessities in life. Throughout the book, he talks about how he does not need companionship or a furnished floor. He instead emphasizes on self-reliance. He also critiques the typical social lives of many Americans and how they are too reliant on materialism. This is a quote from Henry David Thoreau's book Walden. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and so Spartan-like as to put rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and, if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world, or, if it were sublime, to know it by experience, and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. This is the cabin that is supposed to be what Henry David Thoreau lived in while he stayed at the Walden Pond. As you can see, the house is very small with minimal windows, doors, and other decorum. This is just another example of how simply Thoreau lived while he was at Walden and the urgency that he had for other Americans to live a simple life as well. The next essay that Thoreau published was Civil Disobedience, written in 1849. He wrote about how citizens follow laws even when they are unfair. He mostly based this off his personal belief on slavery. In his essay, he wrote, Must the citizen ever for a moment or in the least degree resign his conscience to the legislator? Why has every man a conscience then? I think that we should be men first and subjects afterward. It is not desirable to cultivate a respect for the law so much as for the right. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do any time what I think right. Henry David Thoreau found slavery to be unjust, thus becoming an abolitionist. In fact, he detested it so much that he refused to pay taxes that contributed to the prolonging of slavery. In the summer of 1846, he was arrested and thrown into jail until he paid the tax. Henry David Thoreau died in 1862 due to tuberculosis. During the later portion of his life, he spent his time collecting Native American artifacts and creating a naturalist calendar for the environment. In addition to his death, he left a legacy at Walden Pond. Originally, he sold the cabin he lived in to Ralph Waldo Emerson's gardener before it was disassembled. After years of changes to the house, the original location was not found until 1947 when an archaeologist, Roland Robbins, spent 2 years searching for it. Following his death, his younger sister Sophia gathered all his manuscripts to publish after he died. His gravesite is currently where Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Louisa May Alcott would later be buried. Although Henry David Thoreau lived a short life of 44 years, he still had a tremendous impact on individuals and societies. One particular impact he had was on John Muir. John Muir was a conservationist and naturalist in the 1900s. He became one of the first people to ever advocate for the preservation of the wilderness. He later helped preserve the Yosemite and Sequoia National Park. He founded the Sierra National Club, which is dedicated to preserving American wilderness areas. Another individual he influenced was Alex McCandless, a traveler who hiked from North Dakota to Alaska in the 1990s. McCandless set off to be by himself in nature and have a similar experience to what Henry David Thoreau had in Walden. However, due to malnutrition and other possible causes, McCandless died while hiking in Alaska. As a society, Thoreau influenced us in many ways. For example, he was one of the earliest abolitionists in America. Today, there are over 7 million slaves in the world. His writings and influence of the Transcendentalism movement helped spawn an awakening that made people realize the wrongdoings of slavery and how every human should be respected. Since it was published, civil disobedience has been a huge influence on abolitionists. Lastly, Henry David Thoreau's influence on nature is very prevalent today. Despite that Henry was not as vocal about his preservation of nature as other naturalists, it is clear that he still valued both nature and the benefits. Henry pointed out how people are becoming more and more materialistic, which is still very true today. In opposition to that, he lived a life of simplicity and self-sufficiency. While society may not need to go to the extent that Thoreau went to, sometimes it is important to live simply. This also leads us to not using or limiting our uses of things like cars, electricity, or machinery. By living a life of simplicity, we conserve energy and help the world become a cleaner and healthier place to live. Thank you for watching my presentation and have a great day.